The silence in Julian Thorne's penthouse was not a peaceful absence of noise. It was an entity in itself, a testament to wealth so vast it could afford to soundproof the world. It was a sterile, curated quiet that clung to the Italian marble floors and scaled the floor-to-ceiling glass walls, a silence as cold and unforgiving as the Manhattan skyline glittering below. This was Alara Thorne's gilded cage, a 3-story mausoleum in the sky where her own heartbeat often felt like an unwelcome intrusion. For 10 years, she had moved through these cavernous spaces like a ghost, a beautiful, quiet accessory to the titan of industry she had married. Julian Thorne did not see rooms, he saw assets. He did not have a home. He possessed a testament to his dominance. He was a corporate gladiator, a king forged in the brutal arenas of real estate, and he saw everything, including his wife, as a reflection of his power. Alara, with her quiet grace and old money lineage, had been the perfect acquisition. She was beautiful, intelligent in a way he considered soft and unthreatening, and now, blessedly, she was pregnant. She was carrying his heir, the future prince, to his kingdom of glass and steel. He saw the gentle swell of her stomach not as a miracle, but as the successful culmination of a long-term strategic objective. Tonight, like most nights, he was late. The excuse was always the same: a deal, a merger, a late-night negotiation that could not wait. Alara no longer questioned it. She would simply watch the clock, the silence of the penthouse growing heavier with each passing hour. But recently, the silence had been punctuated by new, discordant notes. A faint, cloying scent of jasmine and musk on the cashmere of his overcoat. A perfume far too sharp for her own subtle preference for rose and sandalwood. There were hushed phone calls he took on the terrace, his back turned to her, his voice a low, urgent murmur that the wind snatched away. His compliments, once rare but cherished, had become formulaic and dismissive. "You look fine, Alara," he would say, his eyes already on the stock ticker glowing on his tablet. The brewing storm was no longer a distant rumble. It was a pressure building behind the walls of their perfect life. Alara felt it in the tightening of her jaw, in the way her hand instinctively went to protect the new life nestled within her. She was a woman trained to ignore unpleasantness, to maintain a facade of serene contentment. But a facade can only withstand so much pressure before cracks begin to spiderweb across its surface. The crack appeared on a Tuesday. Julian had returned well after midnight, his triumph palpable. He had kissed her forehead with the distracted air of a monarch bestowing a favor upon a courtier and had fallen into bed, leaving his tablet, unlocked and still glowing, on the marble nightstand. It was a careless mistake, the kind of slip a man makes when he has grown so comfortable in his deceit that he forgets the need for caution. For a long moment, Alara just stared at it. The screen displayed his email inbox, a list of transactions, and corporate communiques. It was his world, a world she was rarely invited into. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. It felt like a betrayal to even look, a violation of the sterile peace they maintained. But the scent of jasmine from his discarded suit jacket, still hanging over a chair, pushed her forward. Her finger hovered over the screen, then tapped open an email near the top. The subject line was simple: "Our Serafina." The sender was Kira Vance, Julian's ambitious young protégé, a woman with eyes as sharp and predatory as a hawk's. The email itself was short, but every word was a shard of glass in Alara's heart. "Jay, darling," it began. "The penthouse suite is confirmed for Friday. A celebration for the closing. You, me, and the best champagne money can buy. Can't wait to christen our future victory and the new bed. XOK." Below the text was a confirmation from the Serafina, a legendary boutique hotel, the one Julian had been obsessed with acquiring for the past 6 months. It was the crown jewel he intended to add to his empire. He was not just having an affair. He was celebrating the conquest of his next great prize with another woman, in a bed he was about to own, intertwining his professional triumph with his personal betrayal. He was building a new future on the ashes of their marriage. Alara's breath hitched. The screen blurred through a sudden well of tears. The sound of Julian's steady, even breathing from the bed was a monstrous hypocrisy. He was sleeping the peaceful sleep of a king, while his kingdom crumbled around his queen. In that moment, the ghost in the gilded cage felt the first stirrings of a new, terrible life. The shock was a physical blow, a cold wave that washed over her, leaving her gasping for air in the oppressive silence. She sank onto the silk chaise lounge across the room, the tablet heavy in her lap, like a stone tablet of commandments she had broken. Her world, once so meticulously ordered and predictable, had just been shattered. For an hour, she sat in the darkness, the city lights painting in different streaks across the marble floor. Grief was a suffocating shroud. She saw her future spool out before her. The public pity, the quiet divorce, the lonely life of a tragic socialite, another of Julian Thorne's discarded assets. She saw herself becoming a cliché, a footnote in the grand, sordid biography of a powerful man. She touched her belly, where her daughter was sleeping, innocent and unaware. What kind of life would it be for her, to be born of a mother who simply accepted her own erasure? And then, something shifted. The sorrow, so vast and oceanic, began to recede, and in its place, something else began to burn. It was a cold, clarifying anger. It was rage, pure and hard as a diamond. It wasn't the hot, messy fury of a woman scorned. It was the frigid, calculated wrath of a queen betrayed. The tears stopped. Her breathing steadied. The trembling in her hands ceased. Julian had not just been unfaithful. He had been contemptuous. He had looked at her, at their 10 years, at their unborn child, and decided they were worth less than a celebratory night with his ambitious subordinate. He had underestimated her so profoundly, so completely, that he didn't even see the need to hide. He thought she was a doll, a decoration. He had forgotten the woman he married had a mind, a will, a spine forged from the same steel as her industrialist grandfather. He had made a fatal error. He had shown her his entire hand. He had revealed his prize, his timeline, and his accomplice. The Serafina. It was more than a hotel. It was a symbol of his hubris. He wanted to own it, to possess it, to mark it as his. A slow, chilling smile touched Alara's lips for the first time in years. It felt alien and powerful. He wanted the Serafina. Very well. Then she would have it first. The plan began to form not as a vague wish for revenge, but as a series of precise, strategic steps. It was a hostile takeover, not of a company, but of a man's reality. Julian saw the world in terms of acquisitions and mergers. She would speak his language. He thought her financially naive, a woman who didn't understand the complexities of his work. This was his second fatal error. Her father, a brilliant but disgraced financier, had spent the last years of his life teaching her everything he knew, not in a boardroom, but over chess games and long walks. He had taught her to see patterns, to find leverage, to be patient, and to strike when the opponent was most confident. For years, she had managed the small but significant trust her father had left her, growing it quietly, cautiously, through a series of anonymous holding companies Julian never bothered to investigate. He saw the trust he paid into for her as a tax write-off, not an arsenal. Now, she would deploy it. She would not just confront him. She would not just expose him. She would usurp him. She would buy his prize out from under him and become the very thing he could not control. She would take the stage he had built for his own coronation and burn his kingdom to the ground. The ghost was about to become a goddess of vengeance. The night of the gala was electric with the hum of power. Julian Thorne had booked the grand ballroom of the Serafina itself for the press conference and celebration of its official acquisition. It was a masterful stroke of arrogance, a victory lap taken before the race was officially won. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, the clinking of crystal flutes, and the low murmur of the city's elite. Bankers, rival developers, journalists, and politicians, all gathered to pay tribute to the king. Julian stood at the center of it all, a sun god in a bespoke tuxedo. He was incandescent with triumph. Beside him, Kira Vance was a vision in crimson, her smile sharp and possessive as she clung to his arm. She was no longer just the protégé. Tonight, she was the victor's spoils, her presence a public declaration. They were a tableau of modern power, ruthless, beautiful, and utterly shameless. Julian scanned the room, his arena, feeling the familiar surge of absolute control. Everything was exactly as he had planned. Then the ballroom doors opened. A hush fell over the crowd, a wave of silence that parted the sea of chatter. Alara entered. She did not walk. She processed. She wore a gown of liquid silver that shimmered under the chandeliers, a stark, celestial contrast to Kira's predatory red. Her hair was swept up, revealing the elegant line of her neck and a pair of diamond earrings that glittered like frozen tears. She was pregnant, yes, but there was nothing soft or maternal about her presence. She was magnificent, terrifying, a queen approaching a traitor's court. Every eye in the room, including Julian's, was locked on her. Julian's smile faltered. Confusion, then irritation, flickered across his face. What was she doing here? She was supposed to be at home, a quiet, placid vessel for his heir. He started towards her, his face a thunderous mask of displeasure, ready to command her to leave. But Alara's eyes, cold and clear as ice, met his from across the room, and he stopped. For the first time in their marriage, he felt a tremor of uncertainty, a primal fear he couldn't name. The power dynamic in the room had not just shifted, it had been shattered. She ignored him completely, her gaze sweeping over the crowd until it landed on Mr. Sterling, the elderly, distinguished owner of the Serafina, who was standing near the stage. She offered him a small, respectful nod. He nodded back, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. She then moved, not toward her husband, but directly to the stage, ascending the small set of stairs with a grace that was both silent and deafening. She walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and the entire ballroom held its breath. "Good evening," she began, her voice quiet, yet carrying to every corner of the room. It was not the voice of the meek, gentle woman they knew. This voice had weight. It had authority. "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate this beautiful hotel, the Serafina. It truly is a landmark, a jewel of this city." She paused, her eyes finding Julian's in the stunned crowd. His face was a mixture of fury and disbelief. Kira looked pale, her crimson dress suddenly garish. "My husband, Julian Thorne, has always had an impeccable eye for jewels. He recognizes value when he sees it. And he was right. The Serafina is an invaluable asset." Another pause. She let the tension build. "Which is why I am so thrilled to be its new guardian." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. There seems to have been a slight miscommunication in tonight's announcement. While Thorne Industries' bid was impressive, she said, the word dripping with condescension, a superior offer was accepted this afternoon. She turned her gaze to Kira. Mr. Thorne was celebrating his victory a little prematurely. A fatal mistake in any negotiation, then, the final, devastating detonation. The Serafina was sold, in a private all-cash transaction, to the Serafina Heritage Group, a holding company of which I am the sole director. Shatter. The word itself seemed to echo in the silent room. It was the sound of Julian Thorne's world breaking apart. His face went white, the blood draining from it, leaving a mask of pure, uncomprehending horror. He looked from Alara on the stage to Mr. Sterling, who simply gave a slight, apologetic shrug. He had sold to the highest bidder. It was just business. But Alara was not finished. She looked directly at Kira, whose face had crumpled into a mask of humiliation. "And as my first act as the new owner of this establishment," Alara's voice was now sharp, a blade of ice, "I am terminating the employment of all Thorne Industries personnel associated with the transition, effective immediately. That includes you, Miss Vance. For conduct unbecoming an employee of my hotel. Security will escort you out." It was a public execution. The room erupted in a cacophony of whispers and the frantic clicking of cameras. Julian was frozen, a statue of his own ruin. He was no longer a king. He was a fool, a cuckold, a man outmaneuvered and humiliated by the one person he never even considered a player on the board. Alara looked at her husband one last time, a look devoid of hatred or love, a look of pure, final dismissal. Then, she turned, and with the same regal grace with which she had entered, she walked off the stage and out of the ballroom. She did not look back. She left Julian standing alone in the wreckage of his triumph. The flashbulbs of the paparazzi, like explosions on a battlefield he had already lost. The fallout was instantaneous and brutal. Before Alara's car had even cut through the city traffic, the story was a wildfire ripping through the digital world. Throne usurped by wife in hotel heist. The Queen's Gambit. Alara Thorne outplays tycoon husband. The narrative shifted overnight. Julian Thorne, the invincible titan of industry, was recast as a caricature. The arrogant fool, the cheating husband, the man so blinded by hubris he couldn't see the blade until it was already in his back. The markets, which run on confidence and perception, reacted violently. By the opening bell the next morning, Thorne Industries stock was in freefall. The public humiliation was not just a gossip column headline. It was a character indictment. Investors saw a CEO who was reckless, distracted, and prone to catastrophic misjudgment. A multi-billion-dollar merger with a conservative Japanese conglomerate, a deal Julian had spent a year cultivating, collapsed within hours. The official reason cited a material adverse change in leadership reputation, a corporate euphemism for a character clause. Billions in shareholder value evaporated like mist. Julian was trapped in his penthouse, the silence now a roaring accusation. He hurled a crystal glass against the marble wall, but the sound was swallowed by the cavernous space, a pathetic tantrum in his self-made prison. He called Kira, but her number was disconnected. She had vanished, a ghost of his own bad judgment. He was utterly alone, adrift in a sea of his own making. But the true betrayal was yet to come. While Julian was reeling, the viper in his own garden made his move. Marcus Vance, his COO, his supposed best friend, the man he trusted implicitly, and, as Julian now realized with a sickening lurch, Kira's uncle, called an emergency board meeting. Marcus, his face a mask of solemn concern, presented a devastating case. He spoke of Julian's erratic behavior, his public disgrace, and the catastrophic financial repercussions. He painted Julian not as a victim, but as a liability. It became chillingly clear that Kira had not just been an affair, she had been a tool, a honey trap deployed by Marcus to destabilize Julian and create the very chaos he was now proposing to solve. The vote was unanimous. Julian Thorne was removed as CEO and chairman of the board of the company he had built from the ground up. He was exiled from his own kingdom. The news was delivered to him via a sterile email from the board. He read it, and for the first time since he was a child, he felt a profound, bottomless despair. He had lost everything: his company, his reputation, his mistress, and his wife. He was a king in exile, deposed and disgraced, haunted by the ghost of the quiet woman he had so fatally underestimated. While Julian's empire burned, Alara retreated. She did not go to a family estate or a friend's spare room. She went to a place that was hers alone, a secret she had kept even from herself until she needed it. It was a modest but elegant apartment overlooking a quiet, tree-lined park, a place she had purchased years ago with the first significant earnings from her father's trust. It was the antithesis of the penthouse, warm, filled with books, scented with sandalwood, and blessedly, peacefully quiet. It was her sanctuary, her war room. Here, the full extent of her secret weapon was unleashed. Julian believed her a financial innocent, but her father had trained her as a grandmaster of the financial world. She understood the intricate dance of leverage, assets, and shell corporations better than Julian's own accountants. The trust fund he viewed as a trifle had been her seed capital. Guided by her late father's journals and a network of his old, loyal contacts who despised the new generation of corporate raiders like Julian, she had spent years building a silent, formidable portfolio. Buying the Serafina wasn't a spontaneous act of revenge. It was the culmination of a decade of quiet, patient strategy. It was her checkmate. But she did not stop there. Owning the hotel was not the end game. It was the beginning. She took to the role of hotelier with a natural, intuitive grace. She walked the halls, spoke with the staff, learned their names, and listened to their ideas. She began transforming the Serafina from a mere luxury good into an experience. She curated art from local galleries, redesigned the menu with an emphasis on local produce, and established a culture of genuine hospitality. Her vision was the philosophical opposite of Julian's. Where he saw assets to be bled dry, she saw potential to be nurtured. She began acquiring other struggling boutique properties, not through hostile takeovers, but through partnerships, building a new kind of empire founded on authenticity and respect. The ghost of the penthouse had become the architect of a rising queendom. Weeks turned into months. As her belly grew, so did her new enterprise. One evening, sifting through financial reports from one of her new acquisitions, she received an anonymous, encrypted file from one of her father's old contacts. It contained a treasure trove of damning information: internal emails, offshore bank statements, and recorded phone calls. It laid bare the full scope of Marcus Vance's treachery. He hadn't just used the scandal to his advantage. He had been systematically sabotaging Thorne Industries for over a year, diverting funds and leaking information to competitors, all to drive down the stock price for an eventual leveraged buyout by a rival firm. Alara was faced with an impossible choice. She could let it happen. She could let Julian's former empire burn to the ground, a final, fitting pyre for his arrogance. It would be justice, but it would also mean the ruin of thousands of employees and the destruction of the legacy, tarnished as it was, that belonged to her unborn child. She looked at the evidence, reframing Julian in her mind. He was still the villain of her story, the man who had betrayed her so callously. But now, he was also a victim of a greater conspiracy. She realized, with a grim sense of irony, that their fates were still intertwined. She made a call, not to his penthouse, but to the landline of a small, rustic cabin in the mountains that she knew his estranged father owned. He answered on the third ring, his voice rough and used. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Julian, it's Alara. We need to talk. My office. Tomorrow at 9-inch," and she hung up. The next morning, he arrived at the Serafina. He was a changed man. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out weariness. He wore a simple sweater and jeans, not a power suit. He looked smaller, diminished. He entered her office, the former penthouse suite where he had planned to celebrate with Kira, and stood before her desk, humbled. "Alara," he began, his voice cracking. "I don't." She cut him off, her tone all business. "This isn't about us. This is about them." She turned her monitor toward him, and for the next hour, she laid out the entire conspiracy, detailing Marcus's every move with cold, brutal precision. He listened, his face shifting from confusion to shock to a dark, simmering fury. He had been played even more thoroughly than he had imagined. "Marcus is planning to sell the company for parts," she concluded. "The final shareholder vote is in 2 weeks. He will destroy everything you built." "What can I do?" he asked, his voice a whisper. "I have nothing. No power, no credibility. You have your name. And your story," she replied. "And I have the proof. We are going to form an alliance. A temporary, strategic one. You will follow my lead, without question. We are going to take your company back." The emergency shareholder meeting was held in a sterile corporate auditorium, a world away from the glamour of the Serafina. Marcus Vance was at the podium, confidently outlining his proposal to sell off the company's assets, spinning destruction as unlocking shareholder value. Then, the doors at the back of the auditorium opened. Julian and Alara walked in together, a fragile, unbelievable alliance. Julian, guided by Alara's strategy, spoke first. He didn't make excuses. He delivered a raw, humbling apology to the shareholders, admitting his personal failings and arrogance. He spoke of being betrayed, not just by his wife, but by the man he trusted to run his company. Then, Alara took the stage. With the calm authority of a seasoned prosecutor, she presented the irrefutable evidence of Marcus's fraud: the emails, the bank records, the recorded calls. The room was silent, then erupted. The vote was a landslide. Marcus was ousted, his plan in ruins, security escorting him from the stage in a moment of beautiful, karmic symmetry. In the aftermath, the board, in a state of shock, offered Julian his old job back. The room waited. He looked at the board, then at Alara, who stood silently at the side of the room. In that moment, he saw the full scope of his journey. He saw the man he had been and the man he could become. "Thank you," he said, his voice clear and steady. "But I must respectfully decline. The company needs a vision it can trust. It needs a leader with integrity and a strategic mind far sharper than my own has proven to be." He turned to the board. "I nominate Alara Thorne to serve as the new chair of the board. I will serve the company in any capacity she sees fit." The power dynamic was not just inverted, it was reborn. Months later, in the quiet, sterile white of a hospital room, Alara gave birth to a daughter. Julian was there, not as a commanding presence, but as a quiet support. He held Alara's hand when she asked, brought her iced chips, and watched in terrified, silent awe as his child entered the world. The birth was not a reconciliation, but a symbol, the death of an old, toxic dynamic and the birth of a fragile, uncertain potential. A year passed. A new equilibrium settled over their lives. They were partners, in business and in parenting, but not in marriage. Alara ran the empire, her vision and leadership praised in the very financial journals that had once lauded Julian. He worked under her, managing a small division focused on charitable housing projects, finding a quiet purpose in building homes rather than monuments to his ego. He lived in a modest apartment downtown. He visited on weekends to see his daughter, his visits marked by simple acts of service, fixing a leaky faucet, assembling a new crib, reading a bedtime story. The silence between him and Alara was no longer cold or accusatory. It was comfortable, a space of mutual respect. One evening, as he was about to leave, he paused at the door. "Alara," he said, his voice soft. "I know I can never earn back your love or your trust. I don't expect to. I just want you to know. I spend every day trying to earn your respect, trying to become a man that our daughter can one day be proud of." He didn't look for a response. He simply nodded and left. Alara stood by the window, watching him walk down the quiet street, a solitary figure in the lamplight. She touched the cool glass, a feeling of peace settling over her. She had not found happiness in revenge, but in reclamation. She had reclaimed her life, her power, and her identity. She had faced betrayal and found her strength, not by destroying a man, but by building a better world in his shadow. In the end, the story of Julian and Alara Thorne became a quiet legend in the city. It served as a powerful reminder that true power is not the ability to control others, but the strength to control oneself. It teaches us that redemption is not about getting back what you lost, but about becoming worthy of what you hope to build. And it proves, above all else, that the person you underestimate the most is often the one holding the key to your salvation or your ruin. For in the grand theater of life, the quietest person in the room is often the one with the most devastating final act.